In Service, Chapter 7. Surprises. When we said farewell to our guests from Earth, Reg declared that he was hungering for some sport with Robbie in the Hall of Adventure. His only doubt was Robbie's whereabouts. At once I reminded him of his power of his thought. Now it's your chance to try it out. Suppose Robbie has his mental veil drawn, Red asked. Then you will have to wait and try again. Reg chuckled at that. It's like telephoning somebody on Earth and finding the number engaged. Something like that. Well, I will try. He put his powers to the test without more ado and presently come up triumphantly to tell us that Robbie had heard. He's going to meet me in the Hall of Adventure and teach me how to climb mountains, he exulted, adding, But what will you do? I dare say we will manage to exist without you, Janet laughed. Bernard and I are going to make some visits. I want to see Robert, who is in the Hall of Metal Workers. And I want to see Anna, who is soon leaving the Hall of Friends, I put in. Then there is David in the Hall of Orators. I promised him I would bring Janet next time. I say, you are going to be busy, Reg laughed. We made an arrangement before we parted to keep in touch. This meant that each would reach out for information concerning the other at frequent intervals. Thus we could arrange where to meet later on. We had a busy and most profitable time after that. Robert, whom I had met only once before, proved a most interesting fellow. He acted as our guide in the Hall of Metal Workers, afterwards accompanying us to the Hall of Friends. Anna, we found, was just passing on to the Hall of Children, and she was delighted at the prospect. Here I paid a short visit to Reg's father and mother, who were settling down most happily to their new life. Then I acted as Robert's guide to the Hall of Orators. It was while we were here that we had an urgent message from the Hall of Reception, and we set off on the long journey at once. We left Robert and David together, asking them to send us on any message that they might receive from Reg, although we thought we were more likely to get it direct. Curiously, our summons seemed very confused. Neither Janet nor I were quite certain who it was that needed us. As we drew nearer, Janet said uncertainly, I believe it is Rose. Rose? I asked, astonished. I thought it was Greg. Again we sped on, and then as we reached the Hall of Reception, we knew. It was both Rose and Greg, Janet cried. I agreed. Rose is calling you, and Greg is calling me. We shall have to part for a while then. You must let Reg know about Greg, Janet reminded me, and after she had wheeled off in Rose's direction, I sent out my message to him. He answered very quickly and was not in the least surprised to hear the news. I expected it, he pressed into my astonished mind, after that meeting on the hillside. When I arrived, I did not have far to seek, for I glimpsed a little group in the valley. They were sitting on the river bank, and as I came down the slope, Greg stood up between his two angels to greet me. For a moment we did not speak. The angels were smiling gently, and Greg had a strange, baffled look. Puzzlement and doubt flitted over his face, to give place to a light of joy, only to cloud over again at once. What is it, old fellow? I asked. He stepped forward and caught my shoulder in a great clasp. Bernard, it is good to see you. These two guides have been very kind to me. Well then, why the shadows? I demanded, watching his face. It's just... He hesitated, gathering his thoughts, and went on. They tell me this is heaven, that I have died. I just cannot realize it. Why? I queried, looking around at the beautiful valley. Does not all this peace and beauty speak of the Father's love? Look at those flowers. They are not of earth. But they are in the plain between. I stared at him a moment, and then understanding came. Oh, I see. You think you have not died, but have come in sleep. Yes, that is it, he said eagerly. How can I be sure? These angels may be mistaken. You may be mistaken too. Can you not remember, Greg, how you came to be here? I asked gently. He covered his eyes with his hands, pondering. I was in a slit trench, he said at last. There was a lot of stuff flying about. One of my mates was hit, wounded, I think. Then a flash and a cloud of black smoke and a roar, and then he broke off, adding, "That's all I know." "Well then," I encouraged, "does that not tell you?" "No," he declared. "Don't you see? I might have been knocked unconscious." "Yes, I do see." For a moment I was puzzled, glancing at the angels who stood mutely waiting for my help. "How can we help him with this?" one pressed into my mind. "You have lived on earth, you know." Suddenly a thought struck me. I turned to Greg eagerly. "Listen, old fellow, do you remember your visits to the plain between?" "Yes." "Then how did you return to earth afterwards?" "Why," he looked surprised, "I do not rightly know. It seemed that I just thought of earth, thought it was time for me to get back, then I set off across the sea, feeling as though I should soon walk right over the horizon and into the sky. As I walked, I grew sleepy. The sky seemed to wrap me round like a mist, and then I opened my eyes on earth." "I see. Well, why not return now?" "You mean start thinking it's time to get back?" "Yes." He looked at me a moment, and understanding dawned. "And then if I try, and I find it impossible to go back, I shall know I am not sleeping." "Yes, you will be sure of heaven." "I will think of Rose," he said dreamily, sitting down by the river bank. "I will think of going home on leave and finding her having tea with my mother. Only, of course, I shall not know she belongs to me. Yes, I shall think of Rose, and very soon I shall see her." He turned to look at me. "Why are you smiling like that, Bernard? Almost as though you had a nice secret." "Perhaps I have," I admitted, retreating a little. For a while I paced slowly up and down with the angels, talking of Greg. They were very proud of him, telling me how little reparation he had to do, how soon he would be united to Rose and wear the golden sash. "What of Rose?" I asked. "She will have reparation to make also. She also has a very short term before her," they told me. "We have been speaking with our angels, and they are most hopeful. That test in the plain between helped them on their way," explained the man guide. "Oh, you know about that?" "We were there. How bravely accepted, and Rose also. You see, rebellion always makes a deep stain, whereas true submission helps to cleanse many sins. It is the expression of the love that covers a multitude of sins. So if a man has rebelled early in the part of his life, and learns loving submission later on, his stains are largely covered or cleansed?" I asked. "Yes," exulted the man guide. "If a man puts himself in the Father's hands for very love, he makes great progress in his cleansing." "For very love," I echoed. What a lovely phrase that is, to be submissive to the Father for very love. It leads to joy. We turned then to rejoin Greg, for he was standing up to face us. "You are right," he exclaimed excitedly. "I am dead." For a moment he caught his breath amazedly, and then he laughed. "How strange that sounds, being glad to be dead and being alive here. But you see, I have glimpsed heavenly joys already. I have seen the King of Love." "That is splendid, Greg." "You have another visitor," one of his angels said, turning him towards the hillside. "Reg!" He ran forward eagerly, and the two greeted one another warmly. He watched them stride down the slope, arm in arm, chattering gaily. Reggie's purple gown swung with his movements, making bright splashes on the white tunic of his friend. When they reached us, Greg's face was glowing. "Bernard, what do you think?" he burst out. "Rose is here." "I know, lad." "You knew, and you did not tell me?" "Well, I thought it would be better to wait until you were sure of heaven. Besides, it is fitting that Reg should tell you." Chapter 8. Through a glass darkly. Almost at once, Janet came to us. We said little concerning Rose, for Reg had already told the news. Besides, a matter of far greater importance, yes, even than the arrival of our beloved guests from the plain between, was occupying our minds. We had been summoned to the Hall of Audience. "At last!" Reg exulted as we sped off on our long journey from the outer fringe to the heart of heaven's realm. I have waited so long for this. Rose and Greg are very fortunate, Janet mused. They are summoned almost as soon as they arrive. Why, they will hardly have left the gates before they're carried off to make this most privileged visit. Why? Reg asked amazedly. May newcomers go? All are invited, I explained. It is the loving provision of the Father. But I thought until their term of reparation was done they could not see. He broke off, remembering. Do you recall your question to Bernard about the gates? Janet asked. You wanted to know what would happen if you passed through them before you were purple-gowned. Yes, Reg agreed. He said that then the holy ones are only partially seen. Is the same in the hall of audience? Just the same, I explained. Remember, too, that you could not see the king when you first came to the plain between. Then, Reg strove to understand, then Greg and Rose will not see as much as I will see. And you will not see as much as we will see, I affirmed. Nor shall we see what those of the higher degrees. I broke off, staring at Janet. She met my eyes with equal wonder. We did not know that before. No, I must have reached out for that information. How wonderful it is. Reg was looking from one to the other with deep interest. You mean, he demanded, that according to the degree, so is the vision in the hall of audience? It must be so, Janet said musingly. When we last saw the hall of audience, we thought that was it, that was all there was of it. I mean, but those higher degree must have seen much more than we. There was a light blazing over the rim, I reminded her, and that sense of mystery. Some of the higher ones must have seen the cause of the light. Perhaps they saw the Great Mother, Janet interrupted eagerly. Do you think, when we felt that sweetness and that great enfolding, that they saw her smile, perhaps, or bless them? It may be so. For a long time we mused, and Reg respected our silence. He absorbed as much as he could of our thoughts, and as he did so, his longing to visit the heart of heaven's realm increased to a burning desire. He began to grasp the wonderful mystery of it, to realize that even when he had made his first visit, he would still know little of its real nature. Again that sense of adventure swept him, passing on to us also. That heaven was limitless, we had already learned, but that all we had seen was still a minute proportion of all that we could see as we advanced. It was a stupendous thought. My mind flew to the halls I had already seen. Could it be that these were so more entirely different from my own conception of them? Could it be that I had only seen in part, as through a glass darkly, that these were limitless too? My thoughts mingled with Janet's, and at last she said, Then we have never really seen heaven at all, never seen it as it is. No. My mind was still grappling with the profound mystery of it all. We have seen what we were ready and able to see. As we grow, we shall see more and more, so that our journey through heaven's realm will be a constant adventure, a continual discovery. It will stretch on and on, Janet said in a tone of awe. We shall always be satisfied, but never be satiated. We shall grow, 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 absorbing more and more of the Father's light, realizing more and more of the splendour of its glory. We fell silent again, and suddenly Reg laughed. I thought you were so advanced, you two. Now I know you're just babies. We laughed with him, and my heart beat high. It is the most wonderful sensation to be a babe in heaven, old chap. Janet gently nodded her head. A wonderful sensation, she murmured. At last our long journey came to an end, and we found ourselves mingling with the throng in the hall of audience. Janet and I immediately started to greet some of our friends, but Reg walked on, silent and enthralled. There were many kindly, understanding glances cast his way. It was obvious that it was his first visit, and so everyone left him for a while, to gaze around himself with ever-growing joy. We spent quite a long time with some friends we had met during our term of reparation, and we were introduced to many others. Soon, looking around at our immediate circle, it seemed that we were surrounded with familiar faces. In the distance we could see Reg taking some talk with some newly purple-gowned. He had come out of his abstraction and was animatedly discussing all the wonders about him. Presently another joined them, wearing the golden sash, and I saw Reg finger the ends of it with an interested air. "I wonder when he will be united to the One," Janet whispered. "Some seem to find each other quite soon, others have to wait a long time. Richard, for instance." "I suppose the desire does not arise at first," I replied. "Then the One may still be on the term of reparation, or even on earth. However, I do not think it will be very long for Reg. Look at him." Janet watched smilingly. The dear fellow still fingered the fringes of the ends of the sash, and he glanced down dreamily as though absorbed by some tender memory. "Perhaps he is awakening even now." "Perhaps," I agreed. "Anyway, we will not disturb him. He is quite safe with his friends of the purple gown for a while. Later we can come back for him." In the King's Service, Chapter 9. This Wonderful Place. "I would like to see how Rose and Greg are," Janet said. So we set off to find out if they had arrived. The ranks of those in white tunics parted for us as we went among them. Everyone seemed happy to have us, looking respectfully at our rich green robes. "Isn't it queer?" Janet chuckled. "When we were still in white, the green gowns seemed quite exalted beings, and now we have reached that degree, we see ourselves as mere infants gazing up with wonder towards the heights." "It will always be like that," I replied. "Think of the thrill of the climb, Janet." After we had walked for a long time among the ranks of those in white, we found Greg sitting in the midst of a group, listening to one of the purple-gowned. "We might have expected that," Janet smiled. "Greg has always been fond of learning." As we came towards them, he sprang up. "Are you happy, lad?" I asked unnecessarily. Indeed, he was beaming, so that I thought my question would provide him with an outlet. "Oh, Bermond, this is a wonderful place," he cried, and turning to Janet, said with a tone of awe, "There is something about the atmosphere, something triumphant, fragrant, holy. I cannot describe it." "Neither can we," Janet said, "but we know just what you mean." "When you see Rose," he went on, "tell her how I rejoice with her in this wonderful privilege. It is lovely to think that she is here too. Soon you will be together always." He gave me a quick look and unconsciously braced his shoulders. "Only when our robes are quite clean. I should never have thought stains could accumulate like that. Forgotten things, careless words." He was silent a moment, and then he cried, "But the joy of helping to cleanse the stains, I shall love every moment of my term of reparation." "I'm sure you will," Janet said warmly. "So will Rose. When you are ready, the instant you are ready, she will be waiting for you at our house in the plain between." "How do you know that?" I asked, astonished. "Her angels told me," Janet said composedly. "Just now Rose and I are so much in sympathy." Greg was looking radiant, and we clasped his shoulder in farewell. He whispered, "Tell her how I will fly to her." "It's more true than he knows," I told Janet as we continued our search. "His angels told me that he had quite a short term of reparation before him because of the laying down of his life. You know, they said he and Rose would be together very soon." "Oh, I'm so glad." Janet was looking searchingly about her, and suddenly she caught sight of Rose. She was sitting alone, smiling in that peaceful, contented way of hers. "I am waiting for angels," she said. "They told me they would be here soon." Even as she spoke, there was a sense of movement everywhere, and the hall was suddenly thronged with angels. I looked about me in wonder. Why, there was the colourful midst of my first visit. I had not even missed it until now. It swirled about us as it mingled in rainbow hues, and this time I knew what it was. It was the shimmering fabric of the wings of higher angels who had been beyond our vision before. I heard Janet catch her breath in wonder. She whispered, "Bernard, do you see it too?" "Yes," I breathed. Then we can see more. For a moment we were silent, and then Rose said, "What is that mist swirling around us? It's lovely." "It's the colourful mist of the heart of heaven's realm," Janet explained gently. After a while, the angels of the lowest order began to arrive. Rose could see these, and she cried out in admiration at the sight. They gathered in great groups between the divided colours of the robes, assigning places to the newcomers and whispering instructions to those who were alone. When Rose's angels came for her, we joined our group once more, mingling with the green-gowned who wore the golden sash. With my extended sight, I could see Reg with his friends of the newly purple-gowned, and far beyond, my searching gaze found Greg. How happy we all were! Rank after rank were formed as far as even my extended sight could see. Around us sparkled and swirled the misty fabric of the angels' wings. Before us the ground sloped steeply over the rim, where a golden light had begun to flame and grow. There was a great burst of trumpets, and the multitude fell on their knees. Once more I saw the tips of the angels' wings massed like rows of spears. Once more I had that indescribable sense of grandeur, of comfort and strength. "Let us pay homage to our God," chanted the angels, "our God who created all that worship him." The people's voices rang out like bells over the vast hall. "Let us bow down before our Creator who is mighty in all his ways. Let us sing our praises to the Father of light, our loving Father and our God forever. Let us pay homage to our King of love, who reigns in all our hearts. Let us bow down before the Holy Ghost, that his kingdom may come in the hearts of men on earth." So the chanting went on, and we all joined in it, singing with gladness and power, until, with a final sound of trumpets, it ceased. Chapter 10. Angel Songs. Before our dazzled eyes there appeared an oval of golden light. It seemed to rotate with rapidity, sending out spheres of shining rays, and then, as I looked intently, the focus of my vision changed, and I saw an angel standing in the midst. He was tall and of great beauty, his eyes flashing dark in his creamy skin. His brow had a narrow band across it, holding in the flaxen hair that fell to his shoulders. The points of his wings rose up many feet above him, and his feathered edges extended far on either side, so that their rainbow fabric appeared to enfold him in a dazzling mist. His eyes, luminous in their strength of tenderness, sent a sweeping glance over us all, while his lips curved in a smile. How eagerly I gazed upon him! I thought he must be one of the highest order. But when I reached out for the information, I knew he was only of the third. In his hands he held a scroll. Beside him a man stood, also holding a scroll. He too was tall. His robe was gold, heavily embroidered and laced with silver, and on his head there blazed 5 golden stars. Amid the reverent hush, I could hear the crackling of the angel's scroll as he unrolled it. He glanced up for a moment, and then, dropping his eyes to the parchment, began to read. "Brethren, we give thanks to the God the Father, who hath made us worthy to be partakers of the lot of the saints in light, who hath delivered us from the powers of darkness, and hath translated us into the kingdom and the Son of his love." Here he raised his eyes and swept us once more with a burning glance. I knew then that he was speaking on behalf of men, and not of angels. "Who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature, for in him we are all things created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions, or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and in him. And he is before all, and by him all things exist." That all things he may hold the primacy, because in him it hath well pleased the Father that all fullness shall dwell, and through him to reconcile all things unto himself. Once more he paused, this time to beckon a number of angels from the front rank on the right of us. They came and stood beside him, and his ringing voice continued. It is the will of the King of Heaven that these angels of the first order shall be raised to the second order, and shall henceforth serve as messengers between the lower planes and the higher. Again he beckoned, but this time I could see nothing but a great light blazing on his left, and he cried out, "These two angels of the sixth order are to be raised to the seventh order, henceforth to serve as attendants before the eternal throne." The angel stepped back, and the man came forward, unrolling his scroll. As soon as he began to speak, I was reminded of the training in the hall of orators, for his voice went ringing over the heads of the multitude, each word and syllable being clear and perfectly formed, from the outermost fringes at one side even to the other. His voice rang pure and strong, and yet each tone was a miracle of music. "Praise ye the Lord, praise ye the name of the Lord," he cried. "Praise him, O ye servants of the Lord, ye that stand in the house of the Lord, in the courts of the house of God. Praise the Lord, for the Lord is good. Sing praises unto his name, for it is pleasant." Then all the angels took up the strain, chanting their praises to the Creator of all. "For he hath made us from the lowest to the highest," they sang. "The birds that fly in the air, the creatures that move upon the faces of the earth, the fish that dwell on the ocean bed, all are his handiwork, he made them all. Therefore do we sing and praise his holy name, and bow down in worship in the sight of his throne on high." There was a pause, and then one angel stood up in the midst. He lifted up his voice and began to sing in a tone so beautiful, so haunting in its sweetness, that I cannot describe it. I only know that this tender, yearning tones roamed over the vast hall like the splendour of a strong north wind over the face of the sea. His voice throbbed on its lingering high notes, and sank into a reverent caress on the strong low ones, and all the while his music seemed to invade the heart and set it beating high. Never has a voice thrilled me as this one did. I melted out of my consciousness of self into an instrument upon whose strings the melody throbbed its sweetness and love. Those around me were quite forgotten. I lived but to be an instrument of honour, of glory in the ears of my God. Afterwards I learned that Janet had experienced it too. Yes, and Reg, Greg and Rose still spoke of it reverently, long after the voice was still. Kneeling there, gazing out over the rim, I lived each word of the angel song from the very depths of my being. "He is our God, an invisible God," he chanted. "The measure of our vision is the measure of our love. Therefore we will open our eyes with love and take away the veils which stand betwixt us. We will pay homage to our God, and light shall break forth in the midst of our hearts, the light of perfect charity. O come, O come." He invited, his voice rising in impassioned plea, "Come and look upon your God with the measure of your love. His throne is set on high, the throne eternal, and the angels ever worship at this throne. It is set around with light, the light of his glory. O come and see him with the measure of your love. He is our God invisible, and yet our love can see him, if we will." The glorious voice went on, chanting, pleading, praising, teaching, and now I gazed high over the rim through the colourful midst of the angels' wings. In an ecstasy I saw the golden light blaze high, and in the midst a vast scale of spiral steps appear up, which a throng of angels climbed, and at the top of the steps a great gold throne, blazing with jewels, and in the midst of the throne was love. How else can I describe the drawing of that which was in the midst of the throne? Only can I say that my whole being melted in its burning rays, and flew to join the angels in their endless praise. Love, love, love poured out and encompassed me, and with the love a wisdom, a knowing of bliss that penetrated wholly into my heart and lives there still. Then suddenly I found myself kneeling, for the exquisite song had ceased. Again the man with the 5 stars lifted his scroll. In the King's Service, Chapter 11. Stars. At once 2 men came to stand beside him. I caught my breath at the sight of one of them. It was Richard, whom we had seen so long ago receive his first star. Janet, too, had seen him. She turned to smile at me, as though to say, "This is our friend, how proud we are of him." The other man was a tall, dark fellow with a studious face. His head held no star, whereas Richard's flashed like a diamond on his brow. They stood one on either side of the orator, who announced, "For continued service in faithfulness and love, for the humanity that is alone the measure of growth, submitting to training in the angel school of visitors, the second star is awarded to Richard by the King of Kings." As the words ended, there was a sound of trumpets, and then the voices of many angels, soaring up in a kind of triumphant scale. Even as I watched, Richard's robe began to glow as though from some inner light. It flashed and sparkled, sending out spheres of flame, and then it changed to a golden shade, edged with a single line of silver, with 2 silver bands crossed over the breast. I heard Janet give a little gasp, and uniting my mind with hers, I knew she was thinking, "Now I have actually seen a robe change in colour. Never again shall I think it is a different garment." I added in reply, as our friend in the Hall of Reporters said, "Every man wears an identical robe in heaven's realm." Then the orator continued, "For joyful service in the Hall of Books, the Hall of Music, the Hall of Paintings, and for a special mission to earth, the first star is awarded to Douglas by King of Kings." Again the trumpet sounded, and angels' voices soared. Again we saw the flaming garment send out its spheres of light. Then Douglas stood, robed in a tender, leafy brown, like a first carpeting of autumn. The angel's song continued, being joined with rolling bass tones as the accompaniment of many instruments. Far, far away in the region of the eternal throne, the flight of spiral stairs was empty, save for one majestic figure descending. Breathlessly we watched as, reaching the end, it came towards us. It was our master of the plain between, our king of love, but he appeared so ethereal, so lit with dazzling fires that I could scarcely keep my eyes upon him. Nearer he came, and nearer, raising his hands in blessing, looking upon us with the tenderness that we had only guessed at up until now. My heart strained towards him with yearning, and he looked deeply into my eyes and into the eyes of every single one, as though that one alone existed in him and for him forever. As for his robe, it was no longer crimson, but held the essence of every shade. As he turned, it seemed wholly to change, first to purple, then blue, then shading to green, then gold, yellow and white. Another movement deepened it to ivory, and in a moment that delicate tone had strengthened to golden brown, to burnished copper, and back to crimson. Yet all the time it was never wholly one colour, but many, and the rays of light pouring out from every fold were the warming rays of his love. "O King of love, we are always in thy hands," sang the angels. "From every fold thou dost bring us forth, and thy robe of light is our eternal rest. Into the heaven of thy love thou dost invite us, and here is our home for ever." The singing of the angels ceased, and all the instruments were mute. In the deep silence that followed, Richard and Douglas knelt before their Lord. Breathlessly we watched, while he lifted up his hands over their bowed heads. Then, from the tips of his fingers, there poured forth rays of light. The rays from the right hand centred on Richard's head, and those of the left fell upon Douglas. For a moment there was no movement at all. Then the master lowered his hands. The 2 men rose. I saw the first gleam of the star on Douglas's brow, and the twin stars blazing upon Richard's. Then, with a final blessing, our master turned and, followed closely by the newly starred ones and by the favoured angels, he began to walk back towards the spiral stairs. Chapter 12. The greatest joy of all. How eagerly I watched him as he walked into the dazzling glory of the light. How I yearned to follow as the majestic figure began to ascend. Then coming clearly into my mind, as though spoken into my ear, came the words, "He will not leave you comfortless." I glanced quickly at Janet. She too had heard them, for her face had all at once lit up, and she was repeating them lovingly under her breath. "He will not leave you comfortless." Like a murmuring breeze sighing over the hills, the blessed words were taken up by the multitude. Everyone repeated them softly, marvelling, thrilled, expectant. "He will not leave you comfortless." Before the murmur had died away, the blazing light I had seen before began to appear over the rim, pouring through the colourful mist of the angel's wings. But this time I saw that it flowed from the 12 stars of the Great Mother as she came into our midst, from the region of the eternal throne. Again I felt the force of that mighty wind and the fragrance of all the flowers that were. In my exultation I lifted my eyes, and this time I saw a great host of angels soaring up from the lower plains, their wings stirring in the air into a mighty current. In their hands they carried every kind of flower, and these they massed as a carpet before the feet of their queen. Once more I was caught up in my mother's embrace, and lying in her bosom, I knew again the love that the Father has for humble men, and that all life led to the soaring heights of the eternal throne. I knew that we lived to grow and learn, and that at last we might know him as he is. My mother's tenderness wrapped around me, soothing me and yet inspiring me to greater growth, filling me with new zest for the climb. And when at last she left me, I knew that every moment of heaven's eternity held for me a treasure of unending happiness. With her going, the whole multitude seemed to awake out of sleep. Richard and Douglas returned to lead the singing, and the tumult of happiness overflowed in chants and hymns. Janet and I sought out Reg, and we all settled down to a round of visits. There were so many we wished to see. Long after Greg and Rose had sped back to complete their tasks, we three still roamed over the hall. Its atmosphere was so keen, so strengthening, that we were loath to depart. Everywhere hosts of angels gathered, having conferences together before setting forth on future service. But however busy they were, they always had a friendly word and a smile for us. We felt like children turned into a garden, allowed to roam where we pleased and to ask as many questions as we liked. Reg was in his element and gleaned a great deal of information for us all. But the greatest joy of all was the constant presence of the Master, for our King of Love walked freely among us in a strange, secret way which was quite beyond our understanding. For vast though the hall of audience was, everyone spoke of having just seen him, of having walked and talked with him, and there was no single one from whom he was hidden or veiled. I learned then that the more advanced one is, the longer one can stay in this hall, and that to those who stay a long time, he reveals himself even more clearly, that to us younger ones, a time comes when we can no longer stay, when we are inevitably drawn back by our desire to the lower planes. Reg declared that he would never desire to go back, but the angel who gave us these facts said that no one of low degree could remain on so exalted a plane for long. In our journey, we met men of every single stage of growth and development, and I reflected that our Master welcomed us all, actually coaxing us with infinite patience to higher states, rewarding, praising and encouraging us at every step of the way. How deeply I entered then into the realization of his love. With full hearts we joined once more in the praises that began to echo throughout the heart of heaven's realm. Blessed and praised be our Creator, who is our God and our King of love forever. He began to walk back towards the spiral stairs.